who is it that designs the insurance plan?
Mark Cuban is an entrepreneur, investor, and former majority owner of the Dallas Mavericks.
Imagine 12-year-old Mark. I'm your neighbor. Do you use garbage bags?
Known for his dynamic approach to business and innovation, he has also made significant strides in the healthcare sector, advocating for accessible and affordable medical solutions.
The whole healthcare system is so fucked up.
In our conversation, he shares his insights on the intersection of technology and healthcare, the importance of transparency in medical pricing, and his vision for a future where quality care is within reach for everyone.
Trust equals transparency divided by self-interest.
Welcome to Stanford Department of Medicine's Inside Look at the Future of Medicine.
I just gotta say up front, this was the one school I did not get accepted to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We sometimes get things wrong. What can I
You got it right, trust me.
Yeah. But also welcome to Stanford Hospital, and that's where we are right now. And thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
There's a bunch of things that we're really excited to talk to you about. I'll ask some questions first, and then we'll take some questions for the audience. But I wanted to start with this question. I was listening to, as I mentioned on the way up here, to a few podcasts that you've been on in the last few months, and one in particular, you spoke to Graham Walker for a bit, and it seemed like what you were telling him was that doctors should get paid more.
I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be the first question he's going to ask me.
Yeah.
I was ready to bet.
And maybe work less. And the thing that I stuck in my mind when I was like, you said, to solve the healthcare system, we have to get doctors back on the golf course on Wednesdays.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things you said. Either way, you had some very positive things to say about residents in particular. We have a lot of residents in the room. Well, how come you're a fan of doctors?
Because I want my doctors feeling like I'm getting compensated enough. Like I just had a PFA heart ablation 2 weeks ago today. And
we have lots of cardiologists.
I know, right? So that's why I got on my Peloton this morning and I was really pushing it because I had protection here.
Yeah.
But I want you guys to be confident instead of rushed.
Yeah.
I want you to be thinking about, ways to do everything the right way. And it's not that you don't, but there's a different type of pressure when you're not sure about your compensation with any job. Or if you don't feel good about your compensation, any job, anywhere, anytime, that's an added stress. And I don't think that's right. And, I've seen numbers that, where put aside I don't even know what the doctor got paid for my PFA, but like heart transplants, I would have thought before I saw, the doctor, him or herself, was getting $100,000.
Yeah.
No, it's no. I mean, it's just like, it's a heart transplant,
Yeah.
And so I think the whole healthcare system is so fucked up in terms of the economics, right? Now, it's not that you guys are cheap and affordable here,
Yeah.
but just the whole system, the way it's
Yeah.
defined. If you think about it, the starting point starts with your insurance plan, typically.
Yeah.
And who is it that designs the insurance plan? The BUCAs, the big insurance company.
Yeah.
And they try to create a balance that works in their own economic favor between premiums and patient out of pocket.
Yeah.
But the craziest part when I started looking at this stuff is who takes the credit default risk for the patient out of pocket? It's not the insurance company, it's you guys, right? If you're a standalone practice, if you're the hospital.
Yep.
So immediately they're doing all they can to push that risk onto somebody else. And so, then they go to employers every single year. So it's almost like the basketball season, go Mavs with the number one.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll come to that.
And I wore my Chicago Bulls colored shoes because
Actually, before we jump into the details, because actually listening to you in the last few weeks, I think I probably do not know someone who understands the US healthcare system better than you do currently right now. So
I appreciate that.
I would love to dive into that in a bit longer, but even just before we get to that, can we talk about your background? Because everyone, I think, believes that you sort of landed on this earth as a billionaire, Shark Tank, Mavs owner.
I did.
But the reality is that wasn't always the way. I was looking at some of your background. It sounds like you were entrepreneurial from an early age. I read that
from
you
the
were
time I was
selling
10 years old.
garbage bags.
Yeah, even before then, I was the kid that bought baseball cards. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And there was a little park down the street from us. And I would take baseball cards and repackage them so that I would say, guaranteed to have a Pittsburgh Pirate in this pack. And I would mark it up, right?
Yeah.
And then one day, I've always been into basketball, and my dad and his buddies were playing poker at our house. And they probably had like 9 too many drinks. And so, but I would always go in there and grab the donuts, right? I was 12 years old. And so I'm like, Dad, I need some new basketball shoes. He looks at me, and my dad did upholstery on cars. My mom did odd jobs. He looks at me and he goes, you got nice shoes there. You know, when you have a job, you can buy whatever you want. And one of his buddies pops up and goes, I can give you a job. I'm like, okay. He goes, I've got these garbage bags and you can sell them. I'm like, sure, what do I know? And so I started going door to door in my neighborhood. And it was great. It was like, hi, imagine 12-year-old Mark. Hi, my name is Mark. I'm your neighbor. Do you use garbage bags? Easiest
That's
sell
the beginning
ever,
right there.
And it was like, if I could do that and then everything since. And so that kind of gave me confidence, believe it or not, and just led me on an entrepreneurial path.
Yeah, you taught disco dancing
Best
at one
job
point.
ever.
Yeah, really? Tell us more about that.
I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, and I got offered to, and I always had rhythm. My mom taught me to dance, it was great. And I got an offer from a sorority house to go, this is back in the day, go give, it was like Parent for Parents weekend, to go give disco lessons, line dance lessons, right? I'm like, so let me think, okay, I'm gonna charge you $25 an hour, and I'm gonna go to a sorority house with all these sorority girls, and I'm gonna get paid to teach you how to dance? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, if there's anybody in a sorority who wants me to, do it again,
Yeah,
my price
yeah.
is still $25 an hour.
Yeah. We saw some of that on Dancing with the Stars, I think.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Look it up.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. And
Yeah,
then,
if you want a good giggle, dance on, Google Mark Cuban Dancing with the Stars.
yeah,
I beat Floyd Mayweather.
it's pretty well done. Pretty well. Someone known to dance around. Though.
Right, and Wayne Newton, but that was easy.
Yeah. And then Micro Solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I moved to Dallas from Indiana, and after some intermediary stops, and one of my buddies invited me down, stayed with them. There were 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and first started working as a bartender, but then almost immediately got a job working at a software store. It was the very first software store in Dallas, Texas. And it was called let me give you the first part.
Yeah,
Before I get there.
yeah.
So it was called Your Business Software. And I was there about 9 months, and I'm sleeping on the floor, 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment. It was a shithole. Like, when I say shithole, that's a compliment to what it really was. And so I was like dying to get out. And so there was a point in time about 9 months in where I got 10% commission on sales. And one of my responsibilities was to sweep the floor, open the store, because it was a retail store. And I had an opportunity to close a deal that I would get a $1,500 commission and move out of the shithole. And so I called my boss, a guy named Michael Humecki. And I said, Michael, I got this deal. It's good for you. You need the sales. It's good for me. I'm going to go pick up the check. I got somebody covered. He goes, no, you need to come into the store. And so I made the executive decision that I was going to pick up the check, thinking if I hand him a check, he'd be happy and all would be good. Fired my ass. Bam. And so I realized I wasn't a good employee and just decided it's time for me to start my own thing. So I found a company called Architectural Lighting, and I went to them and I said, look, I got no money. And I know you want this software because you would come into the store, and it's $500. If you give me the $500 now, if I can't make it work for you, then I guarantee you I'll walk your dog, wash your car, whatever it takes. Well, fortunately, I got it to work, turned into a company called Micro Solutions. We grew to 80 people, 36 million in sales, and went 7 years without a vacation. But we did systems integration. I taught myself how to code, wrote code for multi-user applications, started integrating video. And this was in the 80s, and it did really, really well. Sold it to H&R Block, which owned CompuServe at the time, and the rest is history.
Yeah, amazing story. But that wasn't the only company you built. I mean, obviously, well, we'll get to basketball at some point here.
Well, so after that, I took some of that money and started investing. And what was crazy was I would tell my broker, because I walked away with $2 million. And I was like, I want to invest like a 60-year-old because I want to be able to live with this. I read this book, How to Retire at the Age of 35, which basically said live like a student. And so I was like, okay, I can live like a student. I'm fine with that. And so I told my broker to invest like I'm 60, and he did, and put in T-bills and all this other stuff. And he always started asking me these questions about networking and wide area networks and software. And I would tell him, and then the next thing I know, I'd watch CNBC or whatever it was back then, and their analysts would be on saying verbatim what I told them, and the stocks would move. And he was like, you sure you don't want to trade the stocks? I'm like, okay, I will. And I just killed it, right? I made 80, 90%. And then somebody came to me through my broker and said, look, we want to use you to build a hedge fund. And I'm like, cool, we'll use my track record. We did. We built this little hedge fund. Only had it for like 3-4 months maybe before someone came in and bought it. And so I'm like, that's cool. And so then I moved. Well, during this time as well, I moved to LA because I was making money, and I took acting classes, and I did that because I wanted to meet women. I was single. I was very successful, but not totally successful. But and so I lived in LA for a couple years. Came back to Dallas because of a girl that I had dated before and got back together with. That didn't work out, but that's another story. But it was right around then that the internet was starting to happen. And one of my buddies from college, Indiana, Todd Wagner, and I went to lunch at California Pizza Kitchen, and he was like, dude, you know all this networking stuff. You've written software. There's got to be a way with this new internet stuff that we can listen to Indiana basketball in Dallas. And back then, the way we'd listen to a basketball game was literally we'd get a room somewhere in someone's office that had a conference call style phone. So it had like a speakerphone in it. And somebody in Bloomington, Indiana would sit next to put it next to a radio, and and then we'd listen to the game and drink our 6-pack, 12-pack, 24-pack, depending on how the game was going, right? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can figure this out.
Yeah.
And so we started a company called AudioNet in early '95 and just started growing. And I remember we had a meeting with our employees, and I'm like, look, this internet broadcasting thing that we're doing is either going to be really, really big or it's going to be a bust, but I think it's going to be really, really big. And so we started out, originally our business plan was to be like background music, like Muzak for websites. So literally we went to, because at Micro Solutions, we never had a losing month. So I wanted revenue right off the bat. That was my orientation, cash flow, so I don't have to raise money so I can own as much as possible. And so that didn't work out very well, but we started going to those same companies and saying, at that time, for people to do something like this, they would rent theaters, because then you would have an uplink, a satellite uplink from whatever location in your office, and then around the country for your other offices, people would go into theaters and they would have satellite downlinks, and they would watch or listen. And I'd walk into Motorola, Intel, whoever, and say, look, we're a lot cheaper. Why don't you try us? And they were like, boom. And so that started, and then we started building the front end website where we were going to radio stations and everybody else. And boy, by 1998, we changed our name to broadcast.com to support video. Everything that Spotify does, we had hundreds of internet radio stations. We had police scanners, you name it. We had video live streaming of TV stations, live events, live conference calls. And, we started buying companies that supported that. And we went public in 1998, and it was the biggest first day jump of any IPO in the history of the stock market at the time. Wow. And so we're just killing it. And then Yahoo comes along and buys us for $5.7 billion in stock. Next thing you know, Jed's a billionaire. And so, but the smartest thing I did out of that, because remember going back, I said I had a lot of experience in trading stocks at that point in time. And so when that happened, rather than thinking, okay, let's just see how high it could go, I'm like, I got this B next to my name and I want to keep it that way. So I did this thing called a caller, because it was stock, not cash, that I got. And so I sold out of the money calls and used that money to buy in the money puts. Yeah. And when the whole internet stock market crashed, I actually made money. And they called it one of the top 10 trades in Wall Street history. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got there to being able to buy the Mavs.
Yeah, no, amazing story. And I really wanted everyone to hear it. Some people maybe didn't know some of that before. Jerry Yang is chair of the board of trustees here at Stanford.
My best friend.
Yeah.
I love Jerry. Jerry was great, actually.
Yeah, and Yahoo, of course, dominated for so long. But I think you saw the future in some way, or at least you were heading.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of disappointing, obviously. You think I'm volatile now, and you saw me during the Mavs. I was worse back then because I was like, ready, fire, aim, go, go, go. And I don't think they appreciated it. They didn't even ask me to stay.
Yeah.
Right. And so, which is fine because that allowed me to focus on the Mavs. But if they would have kept us going, and I understand when the internet stock bubble burst, they wanted to roll back some things.
Made sense.
But there'd be no YouTube.
Yeah.
There'd be no Spotify. It'd be a whole different world.
But to jump to now then, I mean, and we'll get back to the Mavs in a minute, but to jump to now, I mean, you have the world on your plate, right? You don't need to make any more money. You've said that a bunch of times. You could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And yet you've decided at this point to focus on fixing American healthcare.
I wanted something easy to do.
Yeah. And so what we're, in our jobs here, we're used to seeing a patient, assessing a patient, worrying about the patient, creating a differential diagnosis, coming up with a therapy plan or five. So let's do that for the American healthcare system, right? This is the patient. The patient is arguably in intensive care.
Right.
But
The economic side, yeah.
So,
the economic side.
Give me your diagnosis.
Well, it's the same thing you do. You first get the patient history.
Yeah.
And you look to say, why are we where we are?
Right.
How did we get to this point? And, as an entrepreneur, that's what I did. And I was alluding to it earlier. I always look at process and leverage points. And so the process in our healthcare system right now is dominated by a bunch of big companies, as you know. And so I asked myself, okay, well, how did they get there and what leverage do they have and how are they using that leverage? And what is it that people are missing and don't understand? Well, going back, it all starts with the creation of a healthcare plan. And then they go out there and they sell as many as they can. And by selling all those plans, that gives them all the lives that they cover. Mm-hmm. And by covering a lot of lives, that gives them the sales funnel that the hospitals and providers need. Because of all the things that you do, you guys spend a lot of money to look good, sound good, right? Hire the best, to be able to brand yourself. But it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell healthcare, right? You need, or you shouldn't need, and hopefully it will change that. But right now, as it stands, you need that funnel of patients in order to succeed. And so the BUCAs, the big insurance companies, know that you're dependent on them. That is their leverage. And so when I look at their leverage points, then I asked, okay, how do they create the plans that give them that leverage? Yeah. And so what they do to create those plans, they say, okay, let's look at the population of people who need insurance, because there's companies that self-insure. And the crazy part, the companies that self-insure, which is a big chunk of the population, they don't even use quote unquote insurance, but they just don't know any better. And you guys probably do the same thing for your benefits programs here, right? And so, but they still, every year they design new plans, and every year the patient out of pocket goes up a little bit. And depending on what is going on in the economy, those patients, particularly as they skew a little younger or a little poor, take low premium, high deductible plans. Yeah. Which is good for the insurance companies. You know who it's not good for? You guys. Because you take on all that credit risk, and you also take on the brand and reputational risk. Right. Because when everybody talks about the 400 billion or whatever it is, and I don't even know the number, in unpaid medical debt, who gets the blame? Yeah. And when you guys try to collect it, who gets the blame? And when the patient's angry and looking at all these medical bills, who gets the blame? Yeah. But did you cause the problem? No. Right? So then the question becomes, how do you start flipping those things around? Yeah. And the basis of it is so that you're not dependent on the insurance company for that sales funnel. So how do you get to that point? So with the 1,000 or whatever lives that we cover, we started direct contracting for everything. Because here's the crazy thing, right? And we'll get to this with the PBM side too. Yeah. The big insurance companies. Okay, no. Sorry about that. But in any event, so with our company, with the lives we cover, we started something called Cost Plus Wellness. Yeah. Right. And what we're doing is we're direct contracting. So we go to Stanford and we say, we know what happens in the relationship between you and the big insurance company, right? One, they got you where they want you because you need the sales funnel. Two, they contract with you, and then they don't even pay you the amount that they contract for. Right. And so, and three, if I just go to your website, chances are I'm going to see a cash price that's better than what the biggest insurance companies in the country can negotiate. How does that make any sense in any world, right? And so, one, there's a better cash price, so we know that you guys can do it cheaper. Yeah. Right. Two, we know that you lose 3 to 5% in the fight with the BUCAs in order to try to save money. Yeah. And you have, and on top of that, you have more administrators than you have doctors, because you have to deal with all the administrative issues and legal. And then on top of that, you have to have, because they're redoing the plan every year, you have to understand all the plans and update your IT and all that stuff in order to keep up. And then on top of that, there's the pre-auths. Don't you guys love pre-auths? Because the pre-auths aren't about denials. They're about delays.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you take all the money that they're getting from the premiums, and the longer they hold on to it, the more interest at 4.5% that they make, or however else they invest it. So the cost to the healthcare system isn't just about whether or not somebody gets denied. It's about all the time you have to deal with to talk to the committee on their end that's led by a podiatrist that was a veterinarian for 17 years, that has
been on some of these calls.
who hasn't seen a patient in 47 years and falls asleep during the meeting, right? I know, I've met that guy.
He's not your doctor, right?
No, he's not my doctor.
Okay.
So then there's the pre-auths, right?
Yeah.
And then there's various other, and then there's obviously the credit default. God damn, sorry. It's funny because that's Cooper Flagg, the guy we drafted.
No. You should take that call.
I can.
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
How funny would that be?
It's still ringing.
So anyway. So where was I? So then you got the credit default risk on top of that. So we said, we're just going to direct contract.
Yeah.
So we're going to providers and we're saying, look, given all the things I just mentioned, why don't you give us a better price? And now we can negotiate on those prices. Now, one of the challenges is there's only a few number of hospital systems that actually know their costs. Because it's not just about, they know what your costs are, they know what the actual direct costs are, but the indirect costs, I mean, I walk through your lobby, it's hard to assign indirect costs like that to something. So we negotiate back and forth and always end up with a better price. And then we always have the option of using cash. And so we're signing direct contracts. We're up to about 4,000 doctors, I think, and I don't even know the number of providers, but here's the secret sauce. We're going to publish all of those contracts. Because there's so much opacity in this environment that nobody knows what anybody else is doing. So an employer who's self-insured has no idea what they should or shouldn't pay for, even though, because by definition they're self-insured and they're not dealing with the insurance part of it. All the insurance companies actually doing is aggregating the network, and then putting together some software, and then doing their best to take as much money from you as they possibly can. And we're saying, we don't need that shit anymore, And I recommend to you guys, the biggest challenge in doing all this is building the network. And I've gone to the AHA and said, why don't you guys build a network? Why don't you guys, work to collaborate to build networks? Because if you offered your own network, think about it. If you offered your own network in aggregate with other hospitals and providers, and even if it's from, the most, the smallest rural hospital to an urban hospital that only has mostly Medicaid patients, that's what you need to do. And you can even set your own price, but you set the parameters, right? Let's just say, for the sake of example, in this network, that the employer is responsible for any defaults. Now you can be a lot cheaper. Let's just say that there are no pre-auths except in these certain circumstances, and they have to be adjudicated within 10 days or 7 days. But if you guys take the lead, if you really want to change the system, you do have power to do these things.
How did it get so complicated?
What's that?
How did it get so complicated? I mean, even to explain it to somebody is almost impossible. We work in the system and probably none of us could really explain it that well.
It's actually a really simple system. It's just that, you guys are doing your job. And it's hard to treat patients and try to get all the things done that you need to get done. And it's hard to take a step back and say, this is the way it should be.
And you enter this door through drugs and through cost plus pharmacy. And I one of the links in one of the podcasts you were on recently was to a YouTube video with somebody on a whiteboard trying to explain the way the money flows to get a drug.
It's ridiculous.
And it's insane.
I mean, the healthcare side is worse, but the PBMs, PBMs are owned by the insurance company. Look, when you have a almost $5 trillion industry.
It's possible not everyone in the room knows what a pharmacy benefit manager is.
Does everybody here know what a pharmacy benefit? Anybody not know what a pharmacy benefit?
There are some,
So, okay. So PBM, pharmacy benefit manager. Dr. ChatGPT will give you a good answer. But just like
Because it's not obvious why you would need one, right?
No,
As
it's
a
not.
drug company, we understand those. They develop drugs, they make
develop
drugs, they
drugs.
charge some amount of money.
But originally,
We prescribe them, the patient gets them, but it's
That's
the rest,
simple.
right?
Like healthcare is so easy. You go to the doctor. Seriously, you go to the doctor says good news or bad news. Good news, you go home. Bad news, you got to get a prescription or you got to stick around, right? Then there's only two questions in all healthcare that make it complicated. How much does it cost and how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah.
Whether it's drugs or care, that's it.
Yeah.
And because the industry is so big, everybody tries to arbitrage it. So there's a lot of brilliant people in Silicon Valley, and they're, hey, I've got this technology, and we're going to make it so that we simplify, we analyze and train our models on all the pre-auth denials that have gone through your system, and we're going to tell you how to apply to reduce your denials by 1% or 5%. In exchange for that, we want 1% of the savings.
Yeah.
And it's like that, all these things. And so when you get all these things, rather than solving the core problem, you're solving the symptoms.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, take the statin. No, stop eating all that shit, you know?
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's harder said than done, you know? You guys go through the same thing.
And some people, I think, don't know that drugs cost a different amount depending on where
And who
you get them,
okay,
inpatient,
so let's go through
outpatient.
the whole pain thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So doctor prescribes, one of you guys prescribes something. What is the next, okay, you need a statin. What's the next thing you say to them? What pharmacy do you use? Right? It's not, can you afford it? Here's the cost. How are you going to pay for it? Let's talk about the options. It's what pharmacy do you use? And so then the system just accelerates from there. And so the insurance companies that I talked about own these pharmacy benefit managers who handle the pharmacy side of the insurance plan, right? And because they own them, they're both really, really good at ripping people off, right? And taking advantage and arbitraging the system. And so once you get that prescription, you go to the doctor, you go to the pharmacy and say, hey, you know, here's my insurance card. And here's the prescription that you've already gotten through the EMR from the doctor. And the pharmacist says, okay, here's your Eliquis. I'll use a brand medication as an example, first example. And then the pharmacy has bought it from a distributor. Eliquis retail price is $600. They call that WAC. There's the worst acronyms in the world in pharmacy. And so it's $600. The pharmacist usually gets just a 10% discount. So they paid $540. You pay your $25 copay. Now it's $515, right? Now that is into the system. That's when the pharmacy benefit managers have these things called transaction processing arrangements, where then it goes back and then the pharmacy benefit manager through their TPA adjudicates, okay, who's supposed to pay the rest of it, right? And so they say, wow, this pharmacy, they've collected $515, right? Or they're in for $515 that they've paid for it. I'm going to give them $490 for it. They can make up the difference on toothpaste and toilet paper. So first problem is these pharmacy benefit managers are underpaying the pharmacies. So that's why you're seeing all of these independent pharmacies, even as big as Rite Aid, go out of business, and Walgreens need to get bought. Because even though brand names are only 10% of the scripts, if you're losing, you know, $250 on a GLP-1 on every script, you ain't staying in business. So that's the first poo-poo on the PBMs, right? And now most of those scripts came from somebody who gets their insurance from their employer. And most of those employers are self-insured because the biggest companies, 95% of the big companies, self-insure. So they said, okay, the retail price of it is $600. I'm going to go to Bristol Myers Squibb, who makes Eliquis, and I'm going to negotiate with them because I have all the leverage because there's 3 of these big PBMs that work for the 6 big bucas, and they have, you know, actually have across the 6 biggest PBMs have 90+% of the lives covered. So they go to the manufacturer and they say, Bristol Myers Squibb, you know, there's Xarelto, there's warfarin, a generic. If you want me to pay for the prescriptions that come in from doctors for Eliquis, it's $600 list price. Give me $480 for that. They literally, that's their formulary, right? So they create formularies for what they'll pay. You guys know what a formulary is, right? But in order to be approved to be on the formulary, you got to pay them to be there. Literally, they auction off. It has nothing to do with clinical value. They auction off presence on that formulary. And you saw this to the worst degree just last week when one of the big PBMs, the biggest, I don't like to mention their names because there's a videotape and then they'll sue me by saying that I meant. And so one of them said, guess what? This GLP-1 thing that's going on, we're auctioning off between Novo and Lilly. Whoever pays us the most, we are going to put them on our formulary. So you may have seen the announcement where Novo got put on their formulary and they completely excluded tirzepatide and Zepbound from Lilly. How fucked up is that? Seriously. There is no clinical value estimation or no interest in the population they're covering in order to determine what medications that they'll play. So now you take your prescription, you go and they try to run it and they said, nah, Zepbound, no chance, right? So, but let's continue the example. So it goes back through and they've negotiated, we'll go back to Eliquis. They negotiated this 80% off, so 20% of $600, they're paying $120. And then they go to the sponsor and they say, well, you know what? I have the subsidiary, well, they didn't even say this, but they're thinking, I have the subsidiary in Japan that negotiated this 80% discount, but then that subsidiary in Japan is only passing through, is keeping 10% of that. So we're going to pass through to you, employer, 70%. And so I'm going to charge you something different than what I pay for it based off the rebate I get. That's called spread pricing. And so they make money on two ends. They charge the self-insured employer more, and then they basically lie and say, we pass through all of our rebates, but they didn't really, right? So that's just one of the ways they steal. Then the second way they steal, they have these things called specialty drugs. Like with your own plan, you've seen the specialty drug plan, right? That tier. Why do we have specialty drug tiers? What is it about imatinib that's special? I mean, it does great stuff, right? But it's a pill. People self-inject from vials for GLP-1s, Remicade, whatever. You can self-inject Remicade, right? And there's other drugs. Now, some are truly special, but any of the generics in particular, like I had a friend who lost her insurance and needed droxidopa. I don't know what the hell droxidopa was, but I'm like, let me check, Landon, right? And he said they were going to charge him $30,000 a quarter, $10,000 a month. And like, oh shit, we don't carry it. Let me see if we can get it. So we go get it, right? And I'm like, Landon, it's $73 a month.
Yeah.
So they play this game called specialty drugs. Whoever does the benefits here, if you allow a specialty tier, you're ripping off all the plan members. There is nothing special about specialty drugs. Nothing at all. And then it gets worse, right? So
you only have 1 minute left on the diagnosis. Then we got to get.
Then
we got to get to the therapy.
I'm trying to revive the patient, right? No, it gets worse because you would think that all these claims that go through the system, you would want to share them with the manufacturer and the employer, so they'd have adherence information. They're not allowed. They won't share that claims data with Lilly. So we hear all these stories. Like I was talking to an audiologist, and they were like, we have these multiple patients who take, which one it was, a GLP-1, and they've had auditory issues, and we don't know who to talk to. Lilly had no idea. Novo had no idea. There's no mechanism to communicate. And so that's because of the PBMs. And that's the same for the employer. The program you have here for your benefits, if they want to see all the claims data, they'll have to fight to get it. And then there's other games they play with copay maximizers and share and all this stuff. And so these things called PBMs, they basically auction off your formulary for all the employees and all the members here at Stanford, and they treat it like it's an end cap at a grocery store.
And you have a great, if you want to take a look, you have a great pinned tweet right now at the moment on your X.
Oh, where I list
those. Where you list them.
Yeah, I'm Cuban on Twitter, right, or X, whatever. Yeah. And I list a lot of these things. I don't get into the copay maximizers, but still, all these things, all the games that they play to make this industry inefficient.
Yeah.
And so when we came along at Cost Plus Drugs, just real quick,
Yeah.
we just changed the game by saying, if you go to costplusdrugs.com and you bring up, we carry 2,500 SKUs. I was used because I always mess with my friends, Tadalafil, right? And I see a lot of guys in the audience. And so if you bring up tadalafil, it shows you our actual cost. Then it shows you our markup, which is only 15%. And then for mail order, it's $5 for a pharmacist to review, $5 for shipping, and that's in. And then we're adding a network so you can pick it up locally, right? And so you gets to see. And for doctors to prescribe, now if you have a patient, you want to save them money, just in the EMR, it's cost plus drugs, and that's it. And you'll be able to save your patients money. But we've been able to help millions of people.
I was looking as I was researching for this. You're getting, and I know you get these emails too. But there was another, a tweet. Cost plus drugs saved my life. My chemotherapy copay was $3,000 a month, and they didn't say how much. It didn't have it on the tweet. But other examples you have, some of them are like $100. From $3,000.
Oh yeah,
just by providing
900. I mean, I got an email from somebody saying, I'm on a chemotherapy drug, and I literally was deciding that I only had a couple years to live either way. And I was literally deciding that I don't want to put my wife into the situation where she's going to have all this debt on our credit card.
Yeah.
Then I saw cost plus drugs, and it went from $900 to $53 or whatever.
Yeah. It's wild.
All the time. I've had people walk up and just hug me, which is great, but it just shows the insanity, but it's all fixable.
Yeah. So another billionaire wrote a tweet just a few days ago saying that there was an announcement coming that was as big as it gets. And on Sunday evening, the thing came out on some social media thing called Truth Social. But apparently, we're about to have a drop in 30 to 80% in US drug prices, since we now have an executive order because of most favored nation pricing. Any comments?
If they listen to me, I could cut it more than 30 to 80%.
Well, yeah, this was going to be one of my suggestions. I mean, you've diagnosed the patient. You already have some therapeutics in trial, right? You have cost plus drugs, cost plus wellness. Could we not put you in charge of our healthcare system?
But the guy in charge is so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go swimming with him last week, but
Yeah.
Good choice.
You've said apparently that you're not going to run for president.
No.
Is that right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. But you might accept a healthcare czar sort of role.
No.
Maybe? No.
If I was going to accept one, I'd do the other, or at least try the other. No, I mean, look, I'm talking to people in HHS. The good news is, I should say indirectly, because they're not allowed to talk to me directly. So indirectly, and that's okay, right? Because it is what it is. But the people that I've been associated with and talked to and exchanged some information, they're smart.
Yeah.
So as much as we can question some of the secretary level appointments, there's a lot of people that do the actual work and do the analysis that are really, really good. You guys have dealt with people at CMS and HMS and all that kind of stuff. There's some really smart people. And so the question is, they want to do it. They get the headline impact of what the EO was and what the president wants, which is always headline.
Yeah.
And so they know they need to try to find a path to get there. And so we've talked about PBMs. So the question becomes, what do you do with PBMs to basically change all those leverage points?
Yeah.
And it's really just three things. I mean, three things. One, you take away the vertical integration for specialty pharmacy or even any pharmacy zone, because they always steer that way. Two, you require claims to be provided to the sponsor and to the manufacturer. Because just using GLP-1s as an example, just being able to look at adherence data without patient information, just to be able to see, the continuity, that's important, and being able to do follow-up. And number one, and most important, the survey says that the most important thing that you can do is segregate formularies from PBMs and any affiliated company or subsidiary. Because if you segregate that, they lose all their leverage. And if they lose all their leverage, then you can go to net pricing. And if you go to net pricing, the whole game changes. Because like if you go to cost plus drugs and put in Eliquis, we don't carry it, which makes no sense at all. Why would Bristol Myers Squibb not send it with it? We don't carry Lilly products. Why won't Lilly work with us? I had one of the CEOs, I did an interview like this with him where they asked me to interview him. And I asked him a question. I said, I know you don't carry any of our products, but if I'm right, just nod your head twice. And I'm like, you're not allowed to carry our products because you get threatened by the big PBMs who tell you that if you work with cost plus drugs, we are not going to carry, or we'll de-emphasize all of your portfolio of drugs on our formularies, which could cost them tens of billions of dollars. So I understand it, right? But if you segregate and divorce formulary from the PBMs, then all that changes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we could sell on cost plus drugs, Eliquis, and if it's an 80% rebate and the net cost is $120, we mark it up 15%. That's $18. It's $138 for cash pay, and the game changes. And that's one of the smartest things we did at Cost Plus was we published our entire price list. So now researchers can come in, like the FTC when they publish their findings on PBMs. If you go back and look at their stuff, they used our stuff. Like these ERISA lawsuits, if you follow those at all, they use our pricing. It was the first, when we published our price list in 2022, when we launched, it was the first time anybody had ever published a drug price list. And so if we can get access to all these brand medications and publish our prices, the whole game changes. And that's how we can save that 30 to 80%.
Yeah. All right, I want to take a couple of questions from the floor. So if you have one, stick your hand up, we'll get you a mic. Before we get to that, you had a tweet the other day that I think began, OMFG, go Mavs. and maybe that phone call had something to do with it.
Sorry, Cooper. Yeah,
The fortunes have changed.
Changed dramatically.
I mean, I was already going to ask you about the Looker trade, but now there's a new news story.
New news story, thank God, right?
Yeah.
Like wherever I would speak since February 2nd, I've always had to say, like, I had nothing to do with the trade.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is everybody knows what I'm talking about, even if you're not a basketball fan.
Yeah.
And so now I don't have to say that anymore. In the craziest of crazy years, we were supposed to have the 11th pick in the NBA draft. And 1.8% chance of getting the number one pick. And we got the number one pick.
Yeah.
Now, I tried to explain to everybody that $100 million I gave to the NBA had nothing to do with it. Just kidding.
All right. Thank you so much for addressing. All right. We have a question here.
Yeah. Fantastic talk. I have like a question about leadership in general. I guess like when you're like starting a new venture, like especially in an area you don't have prior expertise in, like thinking about like cost plus and coming from your background in tech and the MBA, like what kind of experiences, like motivations do you draw upon to like get your confidence to engage in that venture? And then my second question, I'll ask it maybe a little euphemistically. Marry, have a nice meal with and like settle down short term with, and then trade to your Western Conference rival, Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, Cooper Flag.
I'm not going to touch that one.
That's fine. That's fine.
I mean, to me, it's about aligning interests and goals. When we hired for Cost Plus, we were very clear that we weren't going to be the highest paying organization because we don't spend any money on marketing other than me going out there and talking, because we had to make a decision between, okay, if that imatinib can be $21 or $25, that can be the difference between somebody being able to afford it or not being able to afford it. So you had to be aligned that that's part of your personal mission statement that you wanted to do that. And while we're right on the cusp of being break even, when we're profitable, we'll make the decision, either lower our prices more or share, or grow or extend. And so, I think leadership is really understanding the interests of the people that you hire, making sure that they're aligned, being as transparent as you possibly can. I learned, I was listening to a podcast and it just resonated so much. They tried to quantify trust. I'm like, and they created this formula: trust equals transparency divided by self-interest. And so we're completely transparent, and that self-interest, our 15% margin. And talking to our employees, it's like, we're not going to make the most amount of money. That's not our mission. But, and we've gone from just being a website to now we have robotics-based manufacturing that makes sterile injectables, and we're adding biosimilars. We just built this pod that is finishing up now, where we can take it to a hospital that's in a disaster area and make any type of injectable at all. So if you need sterile water, you need Pitocin, you need pediatric cancer drugs, whatever, we're starting to ship those, and we'll be able to extend that. And for hospitals, if there's any administrators here, we created something called Cost Plus Marketplace, because as stupid and idiotic the pricing is for patient drugs, it is just as bad, if not worse, for medications for hospitals. So if you go to Cost Plus Marketplace, we work with the manufacturers and we work with a couple distributors to store the inventory for us, and we just mark it up 10%.
And it's a public benefit corporation, right?
Yeah. So we have like Penn saves $4 to $5 million a year. They don't even use us for everything. Like they're just dipping their toe in. So I have no doubt we can save you guys. Cost Plus Marketplace.
All right, next question.
Mike McConnell from Cardiology.
Hi, Mike.
I a couple months ago switched my statin over, and it's half the price, and that includes delivery, even compared to using insurance. So it's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
So I refer patients now. But I'd love your thoughts on this emerging of things like Lilly Direct, pharma setting up sort of more direct
Great
and
question.
partnering with consumer-based healthcare websites to sort of avoid the usual
Yeah, no, it's great. So
pathways.
Lilly and Novo, and you'll see others are setting up their online direct sales, kind of like we have with Cost Plus Drugs. Why? To avoid the PBMs. Because they make it now, and they work with a third party, and we'll be working with some of them, and that third party then can ship it. And it's that simple. And they don't have to touch or deal with the PBMs, and they can set the price. Because that same GLP-1 that's $400 for a vial from Lilly or Novo is $1,300 from everybody else, so that the PBMs can make their money. And so you're going to see more and more and more of that. I don't think there's any question. And then the other side of it all, obviously, is I mentioned, for whether it's insurance or PBMs, it's just about the sales funnel. And that's a way to avoid the sales funnel. And you guys could probably get a hold of them and say, look, if you have people who have issues, right, be our sales funnel and send them the other way.
All right, next question.
Hey, Mark, this is Yusuf. We've exchanged a few emails. So it is true you respond to emails. I had a question about how you can incentivize people in the private sphere to invest more in basic science, because drugs like statins and other things come through by 5 to 10 years of basic science research. And the model right now is we have the government that funds basic science research, and then the private pharmaceutical companies swoop in, use that research to develop a breakthrough drug. And the way things are rearranging right now, if things continue, these breakthrough drugs won't be happening in America in the next 5 to 10 years. So how can we get the private sphere more invested in that very basic kind of research that allows these things to happen?
I mean, I think private investors are doing that. I don't do a lot of it, but, I don't think there's any shortage there. Obviously, trying to make up for what NIH is no longer spending is a concern. My guess, and this is just a guess, that part of the give will be that a lot of this will be turned back on if whoever is doing the research with a grant from NIH returns equity in exchange. It's kind of an extension of Martian rights. And honestly, if it was me and, I was president, I would ask for equity too. Because if it's taxpayer money, then I would just create a company that, aggregates all that. And again, if it were up to me, if there's 330 million people in the country, everybody would own one share, and that way everybody benefits. But I think that's what will end up happening, because at some point it'll become obvious, to the extreme, that things that need to be done aren't getting done, and we can't be a country, we can't talk about American exceptionalism. And, the ultimate balance of trade that I look at is, what direction are smart people going in? Up until now, all smart people come our way. But now you're starting to see smart people go out the door. And I'm sure your peers, yourselves, are looking and evaluating all these things, because it's not worth the grief. You guys just want to do smart things and have an impact. And so when that balance of power and we start seeing our Albert Einsteins leave, then I think that'll start to lead to change. Because, yeah, it seems like it's been 17 years, but it's only been since January 20th,
So I was really impressed watching some of your videos and listening to your podcast the last few weeks in prep for this, that you said a lot of your decision making about recently and wanting to spend time on health was thinking about a little bit about legacy and what you would want to tell your kids. And also you want to be 103 and looking back on time you spent with your kids. So in that spirit, I'm going to make the last question a question my 14-year-old son asked me to ask you. Sure. He wanted to say, what was the lowest point that you had? And how did you pull yourself up out of that?
That's a great question. I mean, getting fired is not a high point.
Yeah.
There was a time when that first company, Micro Solutions, we had $84,000 in the bank. And I got a call from our bank. And it was a Texas Republic Bank, this Southern guy, Mr. Cuban. Yes, sir. We just had this woman come through the drive-through. Okay. And she had these checks where the payee was whited out and her name was written in. I'm like, you didn't cash those checks, did you? Yes, sir, we did. We're a bank. Of course we did. We had $84,000 in the bank. Our receptionist, who was taking our accounts payable, just to go to the post office, kind of stopped somewhere, used whiteout, if you know what whiteout is, right? And overwrote the payee with her personal name and took 82 of the $84,000. So that was my business worst situation. But I mean, health scares, from family and all that kind of stuff, that'd be the same for everybody. But yeah, at that point in time, and her name was Renee Hardy.
Noted. Well, we have sadly run out of time, but I want to thank you for your energy, for your enthusiasm, for taking your polymathic attributes and firing them on the healthcare system, because we really need it, and we really appreciate you coming to Stanford today.
Thank you so much. Sorry, it's only back to a couple times.
The preceding program is copyrighted by the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University. Please visit us at med.stanford.edu.